Hello, hello, hello. Hello.
Don't worry. Just testing for sound. That's all I'm doing. Send a message if you can hear it. Again, the stream is delayed than live. Testing 1, 2, 3. Send a message if you can hear this, please. Yeah, good stuff, good stuff. They can hear us. How about side on the live feed? Can you see me? Yes, no, maybe so. Sight and hearing. How's it going? What about video and audio at the same time? Awesome. All right, I'm killing the mic. Thanks.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our October 22nd meeting. At this point of our agenda, we have a recognition.
So, what we'd like to do is make sure the board is aware of the generosity of the Weston.
Turn the mic
I'm out of practice, sorry. See, you let me not attend a September board meeting, and I just forget how to do everything. So, quite seriously, the Weston Lacrosse Club has stepped up to donate approximately $1,275 for a shed for lacrosse equipment. But this will not just benefit the Weston Lacrosse Club, but also Weston Athletics, since so many of the participants in the Weston Lacrosse Club will play later here for the Weston school system. The other part of this, and I want to thank Rich and Joe for this, is, if you will, systematizing this sort of donation. You could see that things added to the campus physically could take away from our appearance. So what we did, and Weston Lacrosse was very willing to work in coordination with Rich and Joe on, yes, it's a donation, but then work with us on what the shed is and also maintaining that shed and committing to that. So it's a small matter, but a very important matter and a generous matter.
Thank you. Next item is the approval of minutes. If I could have a motion, please. Sam?
Move that the Weston Board of Education approve the minutes from the September 17th, 2018 regular session.
May I have a second? Sarah, thank you. Any discussion, edits necessary? All right. May I have a vote, please? All in favor? Okay. Thank you. At this point in our agenda, it is time for public comment. I do just like to remind everyone that it is just an opportunity for comment. If we are addressing the topic you are bringing up later in our agenda, you're welcome to stay and listen to our dialogue at that point in the meeting. If the topic you're bringing up is not on our agenda this evening, you're more than welcome to reach out to us via email to get a response, and we can proceed about considering it for a future meeting. So at that time, would anybody like to join us? Thank you. It's a busy night here on campus, so we are missing our student reps this evening. It is part of homecoming week at the high school, and they have a very festive schedule. Lisa, do you want to share some of the schedule? Do you know all of it, just so people can hear what all the kids are doing this week?
Your public needs to hear you.
You're not on. You're not on.
We have a fun-filled homecoming week. Today was Pajama Day, which really was great. We think we should make every Monday a Pajama Day. As staff and students wore their pajamas. Tonight is badminton. We also had senior night for girls volleyball this afternoon, which was very special. Tomorrow is Tropical Day, so we encourage everyone in the district, central office included, to come in your tropical gear. Tomorrow night, I think tomorrow night is the scary movie night that the kids voted for. I don't remember which one won. I was voting for the other one, but I'm going to watch this one. I believe it starts around 6:37. Wednesday is America, Red, White, and Blue Day, and I don't remember what's going on Wednesday, I'm embarrassed to say.
That's fine.
Thursday is Throwback Day, yes. And it's all like prehistoric and 80s and 60s, and it just should be very interesting, the eclectic outfits that will come in that day. And then that night we also deck the halls for Friday, when we have our exciting Powder Puff game on the turf. We all look forward to that. Invite you all to join us at about I think it's about 1 o'clock it starts. And then Friday evening, we play New Fairfield in our big homecoming football game. And Saturday, we have boys soccer, actually Saturday night, girls soccer in the afternoon, and then boys soccer Saturday night. We're very excited. They are rated #1 in the SWCs. I'm sure I forgot some sports team or some event, so I apologize, but it is a very busy, exciting week, and we welcome all to participate. So join us.
Great. Thank you, Lisa. And now on to our new business. The first item on our agenda is gauging student progress.
Okay. Okay, we'll just jump right in. Good evening, everyone. This is our annual check-in, not necessarily a check-up. We obviously all, each year we'll look at the performance of our students, but as a system we're looking at the performance of our students on a regular basis, teachers on a daily basis, looking to help support them in their growth as learners. So tonight we have a consolidated report in front of you, and what I would like to do is hone in on a few of the assessments that we've typically looked at, the state accountability assessments, as well as one internal assessment, which is our writing portfolio. So we're going to kind of hone in on sort of the meat and potatoes, reading, writing, and math tonight. Following along on you have a copy of the presentation in front of you. I won't read this slide. The reasons for looking at student progress, there are many. I think for Weston, it's continuing to look for ways to improve student performance, improve curriculum, improve professional development. A whole host of things go into this process. And we have the principals here tonight who will be available if we need to call on them for some questions, which we'll have at the end. We'll have a short session at the end for questions. I'm going to move through these slides fairly quickly, but I will pause in certain places where we want to highlight a few of the results. But here, this pyramid is, I think, something you've seen previously. Our assessment framework, which really encompasses all the different kinds of assessments, both standardized, daily assessments, formative assessments, which we call them, benchmark assessments, where all students in a particular grade may take a particular assessment, like a cornerstone or a portfolio. Bless you. And they're given at different frequencies and different times of the year. We're going to hone in on, as I said, 2 standardized assessments right in that the top part of the pyramid, the summative assessments, the Smarter Balance assessments, and the school day SAT. But then we're going to look at the 8th and 10th grade writing portfolios, which give us a great deal of information about our students as writers. And you should know, obviously, we're only focusing on 3 assessments here, but there are many more assessments that we'll draw upon from a multiple measures approach, so that we're not just relying on one single measure to look at student progress. This slide, just to take a moment, what's the big picture? What's the highlights for tonight in terms of the big takeaways? In terms of Smarter Balance assessments, which are given in grades 3 through 8, in math and literacy, in each grade level for both subjects, either the performance from the previous year was maintained or increased, meaning that percentage of students at level 3 or above. Level 3 is the standard level, the target level that we're looking for. We had at every grade level except for one, 6th grade math, either the performance was maintained or we saw a significant increase in performance within that particular cohort. So for example, 3rd to 4th grade, you would see either it was maintained or a slight increase. As we look at the data, we'll take a look at that. The school day SAT, extremely high performance. In terms of Weston High School, one of the top performers in the state on the school day SAT. That is in the evidence-based reading and writing and the math. The writing component is not given in the school day SAT, but for those two sections, you'll see the results were extremely positive. As an internal assessment, our writing portfolio, which we use as a way of determining if our students have met Weston standards as writers, we had 88% of our sophomores achieve a score of proficient or higher on the Weston High School writing rubric. And those are scored blindly with someone who's not the student's teacher. And we sometimes have external assessors who are coming in to do that assessment, which adds to the validity of those results. So moving along, just want to give a few caveats. While I just said, for example, with the school day SAT, that Weston's performance was at the top of the state, we really just kind of look at, where's Weston in its grouping amongst other top performing schools? Because there's such a narrow band when you're looking at these top performing schools that, small percentages really are what distinguish one school from another. So we kind of look at it as a grouping because any one year, the top 10 schools in the state, there's very little difference in terms of their performance on assessments such as these. So we don't get too high or low with each year's performance because we know that's the case. There's always a context related to an assessment. You have to truly understand what that context is. These assessments, the SBA and the SAT, they're given on one particular day, and we know for students that may be a good day for most, but for a few it might not be feeling their best or their best effort on a particular day. So we also kind of take into account that it's just one of many measures. And I think very important, cohort sizes. We have emphasized this in the past, that we are one of the smallest districts in the area, so our cohorts ranging from 140 to 200 students, changes in performance from year to year really may only represent a small percentage of students. So we have to keep in mind that 1% shift in performance from year to year, up or down, could just be 2 students. So we always keep that in mind. So now, with that, just moving along to performance on the Smarter Balanced assessments, and this is starting with math. These are some sister schools in the area. We call them the Durgay schools, and the results range from 72% to 88% meeting level 3 or above. That's the target level, but obviously within that we're looking for growth. We're looking to see how students grow from year to year. Our percentage was 74.7%, but if you look at 6th grade math, which was 58.1%, it was I've highlighted this for the curriculum committee and the board, that for us was a score that seemed very low to us. It's following a trend where we're seeing that cohort, those numbers going on a downward trend. We're looking at that very closely. We are looking to address that this year. But we think that also skewed that 74.7%, while a solid result, we get that 6th grade up, that would have been higher. On the next slide, I think this is a very helpful trend table. If you look at the color and follow it from 2015 to 2018, you can see how a particular group of students has progressed through our system. And now it's not all exactly the same students, it's most of the same students, but if students move in and out during the course of those 4 years, then you won't be a perfectly matched cohort. But for us, if you look at, for example, in pink, that eighth grade cohort, which current 9th graders, 83% of them achieved level 3 or higher, and that was a tremendous gain of 14 points. And we can point to some very specific strategies that were used by those 8th grade teachers. Without teaching towards the test, they were naturally embedding challenging problems into their daily learning and assessments. The same goes true for that 7th grade, a 5-point gain. We're going to talk a little bit about this 6th grade, 58%, but you also can see in the other grades that they were able to maintain their performance. So in 6th grade, just to pause here for a moment, we have looked at several factors, because you could see in 3rd grade they started at 83% back in 2015. Now we're at 58%, achieving level 3 or above. We've looked at, have there been changes in teachers, for example, or a curriculum that could have affected this, or the attendance of students, or the demographics, or a whole host of reasons. Were there issues related to, as we disaggregate, looking at gender or other factors? And we have not been able to pinpoint any single factor as being the reason for that. However, what we do know is we've had some strategies that we've used in 7th and 8th grade last year that were highly effective, and our plan is to use those strategies in this particular grade. Now that's the current 7th grade, to address that. And again, not with narrowing the curriculum to teach towards a particular test, because our other results, such as our measure of academic progress, indicate similar trends to what we've had in previous years for this group. So this may be an issue with maybe the familiarity of the tests for this group and the kinds of problems. So we'll address it with those strategies that I outlined in the report. Moving on, I think you can see here that one of the things we do is break out performance into 4 different levels. We look at the different bands, and even within those bands, we look at, for example, a low level 2 versus a high level 2 in terms of the scale scores. It's not shown here, but that is something that we do. Next slide. What I'll point out similarly, this is the middle school. If you look at 8th grade, tremendous result. Remember, I talked about those strategies that the 8th grade used. 59% of those students were at level 4. And I think if we're getting to 40% getting to level 4, those are pretty strong numbers. This really, they knocked it out of the park here with 59%, which is a tremendous improvement. In terms of ELA, looking at a range from 79 to 88%, achieving level 3 or higher. Weston was at the lower end of that range at 79.1%. But as I said, we saw tremendous growth in terms of several of these grades increased performance. Again, looking at the 8th grade, 7th grade. Let's see, the other grade here. We have 4th grade as well, with an 11% increase. So again, some of the same strategies as in math, where we're embedding into instruction. I think giving students some exposure to the kinds of questions, kinds of experiences, learning tasks that they might see on the Smarter Balanced, but also the teachers using the information from those experiences to guide their teaching. Again, similar chart. We break out into the 4 levels. And here, I think at WIS, tremendous in terms of level 4. 44% grade 3, 50% grade 4, 44% grade 5. I will say any students who are in level 1 or 2 get looked at very closely in terms of, this is one measure, but we'll look at other measures to see, well, does this student need some support or interventions? to improve, and we will then put a prescription in place of how we'll address that for that particular student. Similar results middle school here. And then now let's move on to the school day SAT, the Durgay comparison. I know it's a lot of numbers up here, but if you look at the top, Weston with ELA and math in the first two rows, again, you could see, I mean, Weston with ELA, that was second in the state in terms of the average, let's see, the average score. In terms of the average score for math, that was fourth in the state. But you could see, I mean, very small variations between these districts, these top performing districts. And from year to year, they move back and forth depending on their cohorts. On the next slide, look a little more closely at the math, and you'll see in the far right column the percent of students at level 3 and above was 78%. The way they come up with that 78% is what percentage of students reached a 530 or higher on the math SAT, and SAT ranges from 200 to 800 still. So you know, almost 80% of our students had a 530 or higher, and you can see the breakouts by level. In ELA, the benchmark changes. It's not 480, it's 530 in ELA. So the percent at level 3 and above was 93%. And again, I think that was the second highest percentage in the state. The gender breakout for both math and ELA, slight differences. Again, you take cohort sizes into account. I would not see these as being significant differences in terms of gender. So moving along to the 8th and 10th grade writing portfolio results. Obviously, this is an internal assessment. This is not compared to other districts. We look very closely and provide feedback to students on where they are as writers. They receive a paragraph from the assessors describing where there are areas of strength, areas of potential growth. But we do then determine a performance level for the portfolios. And each portfolio, 8th and 10th grade, has 4 different types of writing within the portfolio, which we explain in the full report. And the students select those pieces. Those are pieces that they selected from their best work. They've even had a chance after this is assigned that they can improve and build on that work. So 83% in 8th grade achieved proficient or higher, which is tremendous. Those 17% that did not achieve that, what we do is in 9th grade, Lisa has a very strong plan with the Writing Center and 9th grade teachers to address that. So when we then look in 10th grade, now remember this is 2 different cohorts of students, but this past year in 10th grade, we had 88% of students achieving our standard. And again, these are read blindly, not by their own teacher, scored against our own, I think, highly challenging rubric that students have to achieve the proficient level. And again, those 12%, this is a graduation requirement, would need to then still achieve this benchmark. And what we do is we have them resubmit, they rebuild, they work on their writing, we get them into the Writing Center to help them improve, and then as juniors, in the middle of their junior year, we will rescore their new portfolios. And that, we generally see that students do improve, and we can get them to that standard with support. So those are those three assessments we wanted to highlight. In next board meeting, we will have the annual statistical report where we'll get into AP, we'll get into college acceptances, We'll get further into ACT, SAT. We'll talk more about that. But this is, I think, for now, really gives you a sense of 312, some of the key measures, the performance of our students. Certainly, a lot of positives, which we've highlighted. One area we really got to look at, that 6th grade math that we're working on, and those teachers are really working hard at that. But looking out in terms of gauging progress as a whole, I think this slide, you've seen this as part of our district goal on gauging progress. We're actually having a district focus on reading with all students. We're focused on inclusion. We're both general and special education teachers, focused on using data from reading performance to differentiate instruction and to help students succeed. We are, in our November 6th Election Day PD, we'll be convening our reading team. That includes reading specialists, CILs, administrators, special education teachers. We'll be looking at our system, the data that we use, the interventions we use, and how we house that data is really key, because that makes the information readily available to teachers, to those who are working with students. And that's something that we hope by the end of the year we've made significant progress on, putting that at the fingertips of those people who are helping students, need to help students improve, or general and regular ed teachers working, general and special education teachers working to help a student with their plan. So I think, since kind of highlighting, upcoming professional development, November 6th, it might be good to just kind of take just before we conclude, a quick look back at this October, is it October 8th?
Do the gauging progress discussion and do that.
You want to do that first? Okay. All right. We can take questions then at this point.
Kind of separate the two.
Okay. All right.
I don't have a question so much as I just wanted to say for anybody listening at home that we talked about this in curriculum, and I just wanted to reinforce the idea that the measures that work so well with last year's the middle school in the math that they're going to be deploying in the other grades, particularly last year's 6th grade, we're not teaching to the test. They weren't sort of diminishing our curriculum. They were embedded, and that we're not sort of teaching to the test, and that they worked really, really well. Obviously, you can see from the results, and we're going to take those and try them at the other grades. I just wanted to get that out there because that was very clear to us in the curriculum committee, and I want to make sure everybody else hears that because I liked hearing that. So I just wanted to make sure that we shared that out.
Thank you, Sarah. Tony?
Lots of numbers to absorb, but when you step back, I see here that the last slide is some sense of prioritization in terms of what you're looking at, but maybe you could talk a little bit about what are maybe the top 3 to 5 things that you're really focused on once you take a look at all the test results and other things for the coming year. I wouldn't even call them concerns, but what things percolate up to kind of create a to-do list that's that kind of will give us a sense of a little bit more granular in terms of what you're prioritizing.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think this evolves naturally out of what we were thinking in last year's budget process, and now as we have these results, has reaffirmed where we're going now. So first, I think what you don't see here are any results for science at this point.
Right.
There was not there was a field test, so we did not receive results as part of the field test. We have been engaged in a significant renewal in science, so that is a focus at this point because we have new standards, and the students are going to be tested on that for the first time this year in grades 5, 8, and 11. The second area is what's alluded to here in terms of reading. We've spent a great deal of time focused on the writing. You see the great results that we've had here with the writing portfolio and the success we had the the tri-state evaluation last year, but in terms of reading, we now are focused on trying to ensure that we have this partnership with general and special education teachers so we can hone in and support all students. That's our inclusion initiative, really focusing in on reading. In terms of math, we have, I think, a very strong program that's been in place. We, in terms of the Smarter Balanced, we have learned a great deal about that assessment and how, we can better, I think, prepare our students by, giving them experiences that sort of embed into the math and focus approach. And they ask the questions in very interesting ways, and I think if the students aren't exposed to that's something they need to be exposed to. But I would say those would be sort of the three areas.
Yeah. I guess to underscore that, I'm going to mention later this week we will get out district-wide the goals statement, and I mean it lists there pretty clearly under the academic excellence what are those several areas. So.
Ken, I had a question at kind of the data breakdown in the larger report, not what's on the slideshow, but what was in our board packet. Just looking at the middle school SBAC results, I'm noticing a trend amongst 6th, 7th, and 8th graders in language arts and in math that the discrepancy between male students performing at level 4 or achieving at level 4 and female students is fairly significant and fairly across the board. Can you speak to that a little bit? And is that, I mean, how does that compare with other districts, other states? Because it's a little bit, it's significant. It's more than just a couple percentage points.
So, we look, whenever there seems to be a more than 10% difference, I think that can be significant, right, when you look at male-female performance. So on this particular assessment, we have seen in math where we have males performing at a slightly higher level than females, and in ELA, I think that there's some of that in reverse. On other assessments like the NWA, we have not necessarily seen that, and this has been a phenomenon of the SBA. I don't know that in terms of other districts. I certainly can ask my colleagues, but in terms of our students perform, and then if you look at our students and the courses they take, we have achieved a much greater gender balance in things like Project Lead the Way and our upper level math and science courses. Lisa, can attest. I think that those, in terms of the male-female breakdown, it's very close to 50-50. Some of that's course dependent, but for the most part, in the traditional progression of biology, chemistry, physics. But yeah, I think that is something that we do see a little bit here on the SBA.
To Dan's point, if that's not just a Weston, or if that's an artifact test that's a relatively new test that's gender bias, it's something perhaps the state needs to consider whether we want to continue having our kids be forced to participate in the state. But I'm just throwing it out there.
Ken, you want to speak to that?
Yeah, I mean, these are the state accountability measures. We don't have flexibility. We do have to take them. I don't know that there is a bias in terms of male-female. I don't necessarily see that based on these results. There is a difference here in performance. Some of these are over 10%. In terms of, and I'm looking at the level 3 and above. Dan, I think you're specifically looking at level 4. But it is something to, as we sit down at grade level, we look at, we're seeing, is there something in the curriculum where, the texts we use, we want to make sure that we're meeting the needs of all students, male and female, if it's ELA. Yeah, we don't see that in terms of NWEA.
Yeah. And just to clarify, I think the numbers, it's, in fairness, the numbers skew one way for math at the 6 to 8 level, but they skew the other way for
Correct.
language arts.
Correct.
So whether you look at it 3 and 4 combined or 3 versus 4, whatever the case may be, in language arts, our female students are outperforming our male students with regards to that assessment. So I don't know how much you can get into an explanation of that, or even if one exists, but it's just.
I mean, dare I say, the literature on this is pretty clear. I mean, this is a long-standing dilemma and challenge, that if that contrast is pretty deep in the research and has driven all kinds of initiatives in many, many locations. So we definitely have to pay attention, keep a focus on it. I think if indeed the NWA results, we're not seeing that difference, that's
Not
hopeful
as-
and
not
encouraging.
very
That's
small.
why you really need to look at the multiple measures. But I mean, almost anywhere you look, you would see that kind of outcome as you flag, and trying to understand, is that truly a gender bias? What's happening there? But we cannot be satisfied if based on gender you're getting different levels of performance. But to be clear, this is a long-standing challenge across education, and it's not to say there's a baked-in differential. It's just I'm trying to understand what's happening there.
So I think if you look at the school day SAT results and you look at where our students are in 12th grade, if you see that, not that, the SBA and the SAT are the same assessment, but the SAT also is honing in on Common Core, we don't see those as large of differences, which I think is a real positive for Weston. May make you feel better, I think, about that.
Any other questions from Ken related to this before we get the update? Because we started touching on what we have coming up for professional development, but we just did have a pretty extensive professional development, which I wanted Ken to be able to share.
I did have one more.
Okay.
Again, referring back to the original report, and I'm pretty sure that the answer to this is we're going to have to bring this back to committee and investigate it, because I probably should have emailed you this question ahead of time. I don't mean to put you on the spot, but in just looking at the assessment triangle or the assessment pyramid, and talking about the multiple measures of assessments we have, specifically as it pertains to formative assessments and the way they're used, there's a real highlight on being used to guide instruction and to make decisions about the way teachers plan their instruction in the classroom. If that's the case, is there a disconnect between that and the fact that we oftentimes assign grades to formative assessments? And is that something that we should be looking at as part of more of a grading practice, as opposed to, it's an offshoot of this. It doesn't connect directly to what you're speaking to us tonight, but it was a question that came up, and so I thought I would ask it. And if the answer is let's talk about it later, then the answer is let's talk about it later.
Just clarify your question. In terms
Why
of,
are
give me an
we,
example.
to
Give me
boil
an
it down,
example of
why
what
are we
you-
grading formative assessments? If formative assessments, as you've outlined, the purpose here is to guide instruction and to better understand student need, why are we then assigning grades to that? As opposed to benchmark assessments where unit tests, it makes perfect sense.
Yeah, so if you, it depends on your definition. What are you referring to as a formative assessment? So if you look at, we've moved to Fountas and Pinnell as one tool we use for
Yep.
progress monitoring. We looked at TC running records. Those are not graded tool. We're using those to determine where students are performing. But unlike a quiz, for example, that has a grade attached to it, which may be formative in nature, that's used for a different purpose, and it's providing feedback in a different way. But in terms of, if we just take, reading, for example, we have formative assessments that are used as tools. And they're not graded. They're not part of the students'. We're standards-based at the
Yeah,
elementary
we'll take the
level.
elementary out of it because we are standards-based. But I'm speaking like to what you said about quizzes, exit slips, and the like.
Sure. So, and certainly middle and high school level, Dan and Lisa may want to chime in, but we have talked a little bit about standards-based, reporting as something that potentially down the road we could get into, maybe in combination with grades at the middle school. I know that some teachers have raised that with us, and we've had some good conversations. But things that we're using on a regular basis, such as exit slips and things like that, they're not always used. They're not used necessarily for a grade. They're for the teacher to use to guide instruction. So there are some things. There certainly are quizzes that are used, but truly they're not necessarily used in the same way as other tools that may be guiding and changing instruction. I mean, it's something, if we want to talk about it at curriculum, we can go into it in more
Well, that's up to you.
more depth.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, Dan, as usual, it's a giant question. I mean, it's a good question, a giant question. I mean, my sense here is then it's a larger conversation of what are you using to signal outcomes, both to the teacher and to the student families. And if the grades is the sort of understood signaling device, where does that stop in the pyramid? The pyramid gives us sort of guidance. So, but I think it's an interesting question, from the standpoint of if these are truly formative for feedback, are you, as a student, getting the signal you need as to how you're doing? Because the formative is yes for the teacher, but it's also for that student. And then arguably the student's family is kind of, where are you? And if the grade is received and understood as a good signaling device, but but my view would be, you ask the question as part of where are we in Weston as it relates to grades. We have a standards-based approach at the elementary or lower schools. How's that working? Is it giving us the signaling information we need or not? Because I've heard it the other way. Meaning you do a standards-based report card, what are you really telling me? So it's a larger conversation. So I would say if it's in committee, look at it relative to how important is it. Because to do it right, it's a serious conversation. Is that a helpful answer?
Yeah, no, that's very helpful. And it is, the question is a lot bigger than anything that could be taken. And I'm cognizant of the other side, too, that if you start to pick apart and remove all these pieces, then all of a sudden that you have a grade that's just based on 2 or 3 benchmark assessments within a trimester, and that opens up a whole other host of issues as well. So it's complicated in both directions, for sure.
Mm-hmm. I don't know if any of the principals want to add anything to this or to, I guess, our conversation in general.
I was just, I wanted to comment a little bit about the formative classroom assessments to see if I could articulate at the high school how we have been trying to use those exit slips and different things like that. One of the things that we have been trying to do, and it also relates back to our, a teacher's goal, where a teacher perhaps is looking at student performance overall, like, for example, with the writing portfolio, or the students that didn't equal in the writing portfolio, or students that seem to be struggling in writing in a world language in the intermediate level. Sometimes what we will do with the formative assessments, let's say it's an exit slip or a do now type thing, or this and that, is it may be as simple as taking the stack. And we actually did this the other day in professional development, where we had all of the teachers looked at the same exit slip and just sorted it into who got it and who didn't, and how many didn't get it. And then you look at, well, why do you think that they didn't get it? And what could we have done differently that would have produced a better outcome? And then, okay, so we're going to try that the next time. So these are actually recorded. The teacher will keep a record of it. It might not necessarily appear, for example, in Power School as a grade, because it's a subgroup that what we're looking at to how to elevate their performance. But when we can make those kind of targeted interventions using formative assessments to then inform the instruction, change the instruction a little bit, provide more direction in the next formative assessment, look specifically at one of the things that was realized in world language was that the students, the way the reading had been assigned to get them to write the answer, it should have been assigned differently. So by then making those tweaks and doing it again, we hope to see improvement. So it's also about targeted interventions of students at that level of personalization to produce better outcomes on the smaller pieces, so that by the time they get to doing a bigger piece, like in English, they might write short little paragraphs in AP Lang, but then the teacher is really looking at, and she can give them instant feedback on their ability to analyze, but also instantly know what remediation do some of the students need. So then when they do their big paper at the end of the month, the result hopefully will be better. I don't know if that's helpful, but
Thank you.
that's sort of what we have been trying to do with ours. Okay.
Thank you. Any further questions before I do? I do want to reach back and get an update on the just past professional development that was done.
Sure. And Mike's going to join me for this. We had a great deal of professional development aligned with the goals of the district. Certainly special education, providing professional development in that area played a prominent part. You've seen the list of activities. Mike, maybe
start?
you can start. And
Absolutely.
highlight.
So, going along with what Ken has been speaking about, we did a tremendous amount of professional development in special education BPS on October 8th, and it actually took place all day. I was thrilled in various forums. So, beginning the day at the middle school, we worked with our ESS program, who was able to offer professional development to the middle school staff. The title of that was called Nurturing Heart, which is a way of reframing behavioral needs in the minds of the adults in the building to look at how to problem solve around students and address their emotional needs. The high school that morning, we did a session on really in line with what Ken was just describing. All teachers, led by the administrators, team leaders, special education teachers, the entire staff looking at how to implement IEP accommodations and modifications so that students receiving special education services in the high school receive those accommodations and modifications in the classroom and have a great chance of success. In the late morning and afternoon, we as the entire department looked at best practices around IEP development, receiving really wonderful updates on how to develop strong IEPs, not only meeting legal mandates, but also making sure that we're looking our best students in that process. And finally, in the afternoon, we had all of the special education and BPS departments that conduct a comprehensive evaluation of students. The understanding there that we have good evaluation and assessment information for students, then we can build really strong programs once we identify those needs and areas for growth. So we are going to carry forward with that work as we move forward in the year. Some of that will happen on November 6th. Some of that will happen with our team leaders and department meetings and ongoing focus. So there'll be an ongoing focus for us. Quickly, just as an update to the board, we did also do our first parent roundtable for special education on October 10th. We had about 22 parents come. It was a wonderful hour-and-a-half conversation, developing areas for us to focus on for the rest of the year. We're in the process of scheduling more of those days, probably 5 or 6 more for the year, as well as a couple of different parent presentations to help educate the parent community and see if they can collaborate partners through this process. That's just a quick update on the October 8th.
Super. Great. Any additional follow-up questions on this? Ken, as always, thank you for the excellent work. Thank you. Rich, the financial update.
So this is the financial report through September. We have a budget of $51.4 million with year-to-date expenditures of $10.7, encumbrances of $37.7 million, and anticipated expenditures of $2.8 million. We did add special ed encumbrance holds of $343,500. This does leave a projected deficit of $145,948. There are transfers totaling $28,227, with just 2 in excess of $5,000. Those include $6,000 for overtime for technology to address technology projects while a technician position is vacant, and then $5,050 to adjust the salary account for the vacant technician position, which is anticipated to be filled by an employee on a higher step level. And then moving to page 37 of the financial report, which for the Internal Services Fund, which only represents dental, we are showing a net change of $58,837. We did hold off on making the September contribution for dental until a later date due to the census changes in the health insurance account that we discussed last month.
Could I have a motion, please?
Move that the Weston Board of Education approve the transfers as presented by Mr. Rudel in the third fiscal year 19 financial update.
May I have a second?
Second.
Stan, thank you. Any questions, comments? All right, may I have a vote? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Next on our list is our budget calendar approval. Mitch?
So the fiscal year 20 budget development has begun. So before is the fiscal year 20 budget calendar. There were a few recommended changes from the previous year's calendar that were discussed at Finance Committee. First, a copy of the draft budget will be distributed to the Board of Ed on January 4th, 2019, as opposed to the later date in December. We will hold a budget workshop meeting on January 9th to give Board of Ed members an opportunity to ask more questions rather than have them submitted to the superintendent with written Q&A back and forth. We will then allow those still Board of Ed members to submit written questions to the superintendent, who will distribute them to the various administrators should they have a question that they didn't ask at the workshop or another one that just comes to them. We will hold our regular scheduled Finance Committee meeting on the 11th. Questions will be then sent to the superintendent with written responses due on January 16th. We will have our budget presentation on January 19th, and then we will hold a Q&A session on January 22nd with anticipated vote of the budget by the Board of Ed on January 24th. The dates for the Board of Selectmen and Board of Finance are still tentative, but they're shown as the equivalent date of last year.
I might underscore a couple of things then. I think for the Finance Committee, I think it'd be a great time to talk a bit because we made some significant changes from how we've done this before. I liked how that process worked in committee. We really dug in. I think it's, particularly for the, and Jacqueline and Tony, you can certainly speak. Others, as a newcomer, Mike Rizzo was very taken with how that committee really worked because this is different. As of right after the break, the budget will be out to the board, and then we will sit with the board, and I think I've asked the principals to be part of that, cabinet, Joe Olenek, to really have a workshop with you. And we've agreed there'll be no gotcha moments. We'll do a brief thematic introduction. Rich and I will, probably Mike Rizzo, because the PPS will be still significant, but a brief thematic introduction, but then have a workshop with the board as to here's the budget, here are questions, and anywhere in Fairfield County, administrators worry about that gotcha moment. It's not just in Weston, but you've agreed that if we don't know the answer, you'll be fine for us to say we don't know the answer, we'll get back to you. We'll list each question very carefully, though. Some of those we may be able to answer verbally, so that's one less written question. I think it's really important, written answer. I think it's really important that for documentation purposes for the public, while this will be a public meeting, that we're listing all of the questions asked so the community knows you're doing your due diligence. Some answers will require charting, graphs, all the rest. Some of us are really smart, but we can't create charts like that, so we will have to be back to you with that in writing. But I like this process because we're going to be digging into it, working on it. It extends the time a bit that you as a board have the budget to publicly be talking about it. So I like what we have here, and so we'll try it out if you approve it, and we'll see. But I don't know if there's some other comments.
I had a clarifying, and I just wanted to check, with everyone as we pulled this together. The one we're doing on the 9th. Public members can come, right?
Well, it has to be public.
Okay.
It has to be
I'm
public.
just saying that I
That's
just
the
want to
whole
kind
board.
of underscore that there.
No, that is a board meeting, not a committee meeting.
Great. Okay. Because I just want to make sure we have plenty of, public, if someone wants to comment publicly, that we have a forum for them to do that. So that would be on the 9th.
That would be a board workshop. There would not be public comment at that point. That's a time for the board to do its work in public. The comment sessions would be then later in the process.
Right. So I just want to make sure we have enough. So we have the 17th, because I know we did it within our meeting. So we have time for public comment there, someone to come and talk about it. And then we have the 22nd. And I know historically we've had 2 sort of sessions for Q&A. I just want to kind of review that with everyone since we had it in the Finance Committee meeting and we talked about it, but I just wanted to highlight that with others here. I think we've had 2 Q&A sessions and we've just kind of funneled it into one with having a
I'm all for that.
okay, and having that earlier session on the 9th. So I just wanted, that's sort of the major change that we did. Okay.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
just that, you know, I think the discussion in committee was one where, you know, I felt in the process last year that having some time ahead of the presentation as a board to actually sit and talk about it and discuss it, and using that time instead of, you know, we spent a lot of time with written questions and a huge amount of time spent by the administration answering those questions, and I thought that we may make better use of that time by having a workshop first, and then if questions still remain unanswered, to have that vehicle so that we can actually have written responses.
And I just want to reiterate this point, since we do have some of our principals here in addition to our cabinet, that this is, we very much view this in our committee discussions as being a collaborative process, and that it is completely A-OK to say, I'd like to take some time and get back to you in that one in writing. As Bill said, no gotcha moments here. This is truly a team exercise to work through I'm sure, the depth of material that you're going to be handing to us, and to allow us to do our due process as far as questioning and getting comfortable with how all the numbers are coming together. But we truly want it to be collaborative, and we want you to be completely okay to say, you know what, I'd like to get back to you with that one in writing, and not feel that you're put on the spot, that you have to answer every question the minute it's put to you. And as always with these processes, once we come out the other end of this next spring, we'll have a sit down and a revamp and talk about what worked and what didn't work as we introduce this new process this year. But I think we had a very robust conversation in committee between the committee members and the administration, and I know Bill and I both feel that this is a good avenue to explore for our budget process this year.
I think in budget presentations, in budget years, you're always looking for something to make it more transparent. And this calendar is very much an old calendar, and what I was brought up in. I think going to the questions was very good because it was an effort to clarify and make it all better, but we got tripped up on the process. So this now, I think, focuses it back on again and still allows people to ask questions and still gets to where we need to be, but I think it's a friendlier process.
And I will say the other thing that we've done is the meetings in mid-January. We've spread them out a little bit. Last year we were Tuesday, Thursday, back to back. There really wasn't a lot of time for the public to completely digest what had been presented, not a lot of time for us to respond to questions that were being put to us. So we've spread things out a little bit to allow more time for everybody to work through the massive amounts of data that we're going to be handling in January, which I'm very happy about that shift.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, in essence, you can see it right here, because we still will do, to some extent, on the 17th of January, the formal budget presentation. It'll be a little bit abbreviated, because we've done the thematic on the 9th. But as of the 4th, when you get the budget, it's then public. As of the 9th, it's public. So you've already put it out in the public 7-8 days earlier than normal. And then I think, it's really up to you as a board on those sessions on the 17th, 22nd, 24th. If the 22nd occurs, if you're sensing, you could have public comment sections in each of those. So if you as a board are feeling you want to give plenty of opportunity, and unlike at least the last couple of years, really from the 4th on, if not the 9th on, that's a public session. So there'll be, for the interested public, they'll have more lead time to listen, think, and then come forward with comments. And again, it's public comment, not public discussion. That can get frustrating for some people, but that's but you as a board can for sure know the public had plenty of time to give comment.
So tonight, we actually, once we're done with any questions concerning this, we actually will formally vote to approve this as our calendar for the budget process this year. And I would like to encourage everyone to please make sure you have these dates on your personal calendars. I'm sure Meredith will have them in our BOE calendar, so they'll automatically feed, so that we can have as many people present as possible for these meetings, because we will be pulling a lot of staff time for these meetings, so we want to be respectful of that.
Is the 22nd sort of a snow day, or is that, we usually have a snow day.
We do. I thought about that too.
Is that,
We don't have a formal snow day built in right now, but we have time available if we need.
I don't even know why it did it, but oh my God.
That's the official word.
Okay,
No snow days this year. Ding, ding, ding. No snow days.
This is how you're going to be notified. Forget it.
I thought about that. It is a little tight on the 22nd, 23rd. I mean, if we, maybe there's something to think about, but there's no time.
I know.
We have a week between the 24th and the 31st, which is when we have to not even.
Second is optional, technically. It says if need, hold, if needed. It says we can use that should one of our other
Yes.
days get, I'm just asking.
And like I say, and we have a full week
Conceptually, is that-
that we can shift if somehow we end up with some snow situations.
I appreciate the rejiggering you guys did. I was a little, like you said, I liked when Denise came up with the idea of the written questions. It did allow the public to go through and look at what we were doing. We spent a lot of time asking 1,000 questions behind the scenes. But I found it a little bit frustrating when we took out the piece of our asking questions face to face, back and forth. So I appreciate putting that piece back in for us. I like this budget if that's our conceptual snow day. Hopefully we won't need it, but if we don't have them, we will.
Right. I think to the extent that, I mean, it's definitely on the radar if the snow day is needed. And then the other piece is really just streamlining the content of what we're trying to go for on the budget side. So that is that 9th that we've targeted. So definitely hope it's, less work on the questions.
I think that also allows them, it says it being written, a lot of our questions don't actually need written responses from them, but with the purely written process, they had to respond in writing. A lot of them really didn't need to be written back to us. You could have just said, well,
We like the interaction.
Just to be,
I think we
this
should
is
do
something,
that.
just so I
Right.
want to be clear, though, in deference to the administrators, because we'd spent a lot of time on this. Some of the administrators, for certain questions, would prefer actually to write and then speak to that. And that's, so, but now with the workshop, there could be a set of questions. It's truly a verbal response. You don't need the written. But there are going to be some that we still have to have it in writing because the nature of the.
That's when they could say, I'll get back to you on that.
And that can
Yeah.
happen real time, exactly.
But we could eliminate a lot of the easy ones with just a verbal quick.
Well,
resolution.
it'll eliminate the questions that are really statements, not questions.
Right.
So you can just say it.
So,
If I make
so with that,
If I could make that noise again, I would.
could I
Statement 4 times.
could I have a motion to approve this budget calendar, please?
I move to approve the fiscal year 20 budget calendar.
I'll second it.
Second.
Thank you. Any further questions or comments? All in favor? Thank you.
Yeah.
Moving right along with budget issues, we're now reviewing the budget assumptions for the calendar.
Sure. So the budget assumptions include a budget framed by our action steps towards developing global citizens, including academic excellence, digital learning, healthy learning environment, gauging district progress, and resources for learning. As always, we'll look for areas of possible cost containment. Enrollment currently is projected to decline by 19 students, or less than 1%. We'll adhere to all collective bargaining agreements, which do expire at the end of fiscal year 20. The CPI is estimated to be 2.2%. We will meet all federal and state mandates. We will maintain high-quality professional development. And among other things, we will consider near and long-term efficiency opportunities as they emerge.
Any questions from anyone concerning the assumptions outlined?
We've seen this in the finance committee.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Move that the Weston Board of Education approve the fiscal year 20 operating budget assumptions.
Thank you. Second?
Second.
Thank you. Any other questions for the assumptions?
If we get updated projections, are we going to put them in because the upper schools don't really track because the numbers are already higher than the projections in some of the grades? Our actuals this year, if you know what I mean, it would look like we're losing students because they're projections. But like 11th grade would lose a student going to 12th grade next year. It's a projection, so if when we get the new ones, will we slip them into this, is what I'm asking.
So these are the projections provided by Mike Zuba based on the October 1 enrollment numbers.
Oh,
Yes.
okay. Alrighty then.
Any other questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Jacqueline, was that out? Oh, sorry. I just wanted to make sure. Now we are moving on to discussion on our space utilization phase 2 study. It's going to be a joint effort. Phil, you're doing a...
Go out of here just because we want to run this PowerPoint.
Okay. I'm going to switch over.
Rich will join me in this, but what I wanted to do for the board and the public here is, in September, you had a conversation about, I'm going to get this in the slide. So in September, you had this before you, and you talked a good deal about it, had some different discussions, then it came back into facilities to talk about, and I've shared this with the board. I wasn't here, and actually that distance helped a little bit because I got good reporting on the discussion. Also, that space, there were some questions not addressed that I thought needed to be addressed, so we've sort of dug back into this. I want to emphasize here that this presentation does reflect all the conversation between September and today, and there are purposely still some points not in writing here that now verbally I will emphasize. What's very important here is what you have would be a proposed phase 2, and I'm acting this out. Phase 2 of this quite comprehensive, extensive work. This firm was selected through a very competitive RFP process, a incredibly thorough, detailed analysis as most districts go through when they're looking at some potential major investments in capital. But this firm won that race, did a very thorough set of work. Through the board's work with this document, not only reading it, studying it, but going out then to each of the physical spaces you see here up above, here on the screen, then saying there are additional questions. What this study did, the 10-year, really this big document is reduced here to, I'm not going to go through each item, but it was truly looking at, and this was last November you received it, but really the major elements as you think about every aspect of our campus, all the buildings, enrollment analysis done by Malone and McBroom, that's Mike Zuba, the name mentioned earlier. So a very comprehensive look, both at the facilities, the enrollment, the demands. It brought in educational considerations in a variety of ways, and particularly at the middle school, as you see on item number 5 there, began to look at some different potential approaches, educationally speaking. So very thorough work. However, began thinking through this, and their estimates, this is a feasibility study. I am purposely emphasizing that again. This is not a plan. This is a study, and what is quite normal and standard is you study, you do the feasibility work, then you start to make decisions about what will be the plan. The board, you all said, we still need to do a little more study. And that is, as you look at the estimated cost contained herein, and it's somewhere in the neighborhood of what, Rich, overall? Yeah, so it's about an $80 million expense, not a plan, a study. And as the board looked at that, with a very large share of that around the middle school, because this work, in a sense, ranked greatest need through least need. Middle school, 1, high school, 2nd. WISP, which has largely been taken care of because of the knee wall, was 3rd, so that ranking may shift. Hurlbut 4th. Somewhere in there is the central office and the annex and how we deal with that. But this study also looked at the bus depot, the location, looked at a variety of other things. Cutting through all that, though, you as a board said, given this cost, and given the middle school is highest on the list, conceivably, could this be, should we be thinking now about the number of schools we have, the space we have in those schools, and could there be an even different configuration? Could you provide what we have here educationally, could you do that in 3 sites? Not just 4, 3 sites. But in September, that really wasn't the clear question. So since then, we've looked at it, and now in this presentation, making it very clear that this Phase 2 study, and in our minds as administration, it's really important this same firm do this work, because again, it's building on this big set of work. But Phase 2, zero in on, can the high-quality programming we have, curricular and co-curricular in Weston, can that be provided in 3 sites, not 4 sites? So it's not limiting programs, it's not cutting back on programs, but it's saying, can we, with the enrollment we have, the high-quality work we want to have, can you do that in 3 sites as opposed to 4? And by doing that, would you actually have a more cost-effective approach to get to the high-quality work you want through major facility renovation and review? So we're suggesting to take that look. It's a hypothesis. It's a hunch. Great research in science, you put a hypothesis out and it's proved wrong. If the hunch is proved wrong, I personally and professionally have serious doubts about whether you could have the viable programs you have in 3 sites. But given the cost to renovate the 4 sites, we owe it to the Weston taxpayers to look at all options. And so that would mean to study, could you have a 3-site campus, and I'm emphasizing this again, that still is as good and even better quality programming and a range of programming we have. To do this, we have suggested that it be, you sort of look at 2 scenarios. You can't quite read it, it's a little blurry, but scenario 1 would be you, and to do this analysis, you got to freeze certain things. So one freeze would be, let's say you take the middle school offline, you don't renovate the middle school, and instead you shift all of those programmings and everything you're doing into the other 3 buildings. And so this analysis would say, what would it take to do everything that's in this middle school and you would hope to do in this middle school and have it in 3 sites? Other scenario would be Hurlbut. You don't have Hurlbut, you take that set of programming and opportunities and you shift that into these other 3 buildings. And you run all the costs, all the implications that are required to understand this. We've already arrived at a set of questions to consider. These are done when we've arrived these in discussions with the board, listening to all of you. Key in all this, and I won't go through all of them, you can read better than I'm speaking tonight, but key is if you go to this next page, if you go to 3 schools, and Rich is going to give me these numbers again in a second, you're potentially looking at quite large schools. Even as we think of the decline, Rich, out through what year, roughly? 20, I think it was 10 years out. Yeah, so even 10 years out, you're looking at, I'm looking at bullet number 5 here in particular. You might have schools ranging from a minimum of 600 in size up to as large as 925. The high school is currently 800. That's considered a small high school. It's a very manageable high school. But elementary schools that run upwards of 900 students, we only know one other district in the area that does that. That's Wilton. And so these are things to consider. very, very carefully, because where you now have 400 student lower schools, the management of those buildings, the quality of the programming there, we'd have to look at that very, very carefully. But the kind of investment that Weston's going to have to make, be it 4 sites or whatever number of sites, you still want to examine this and understand it. So the study would have to look at a question such as number 5. To address number 5, then you're immediately getting into number 6, which is grade reconfigurations. You may not have the buildings configured the way you now have them grade-wise. You'd have to analyze that. There are a number of other pieces here. Number 8 is very significant. We have a lot of opportunity to do that much more regarding PPS and special education. And that could either be in a 4-site arrangement or a 3-site arrangement. My view of the value of going down this path of studying 3 sites versus 4 sites is I think we'll get insights on, even if you decide as a board that we have to stay with 4 sites, you're not going to save money. You may actually cost a lot more money. There's also potentially very severe opportunity cost and all the rest by shifting. But while trying to figure that out, I think we can get great insights on what more can we do in the 4 sites for the purpose of the PPS. But that could also go into other areas, STEM, the arts, all the rest. So to me, this phase 2 is fine-tuning even the analysis around the 4 sites, even while looking at the 3 sites, if I'm being clear there. Now, process-wise, if you as a board agree to take this step, the administration is recommending you do so, recommending tonight you vote to do so we can get moving on this. We would form a strategic facilities planning committee that's listed there. You would have a Board of Ed representative on it. You'd have a PTO representative on it. For items 2 and 3, there's much more known and understood than's written there, and that's quite intentional. If you form the committee, before we develop the work plan, the committee would go out and talk to the first selectman about, and or his designee, about what questions they would want answered in this phase 2 study, as we're thinking again 3 versus 4 sites. That's the focus of the study, 3 versus 4 sites. We also would talk to the first selectman about the building committee. The building committee most effectively is involved once you as a Board of Ed have determined the plan, the design, the ed specs. It is then handed off to the building committee. The charter in Weston's a little bit different, but most other communities in Connecticut, it is decided and then handed to the building committee to then run the actual major capital project.
If I could, just to make it even more important, I think, it has to be an approved project with a budget for it to go to the building committee.
Right.
So this is nowhere near there.
Yep. So, but we understand the need to at least say to the building committee, what kind of questions would you have, but to bring them deeply into this process ahead of when they would normally and most effectively in the process could be counterproductive. But we would go to the first selectman and say, how would you want to gather the questions of the building committee? We would go to the Board of Finance, item 3, and say, what kind of questions might the Board of Finance have now? Again, not to get them into the decision-making too early, because in any of these major efforts, you would at a key point have to go to the Board of Finance and say, here's what we're proposing. Is this financially possible in Weston? There are a couple other bodies we would turn to in developing the work plan. That's under 4. We would specify in the work plan who else we'd be talking to. We certainly would be talking to Parks and Recreation. We certainly would be talking to the Senior Center. We certainly would be talking to a range of other people. And that would be specified in number 4. We'd specify more conversations, focus groups, all the rest with parents, students, and all the rest to understand that. But that would be the work plan to be developed in number 4. So some of that work plan is not listed here because we haven't developed it yet. That would be the work of this planning committee. Planning committee would then go through, after that work plan is developed and implemented, would come back with a set of recommendations as it relates to 3 versus 4 sites, paying a lot of attention already in the bigger study, but now this more focused study. We then would come back to you as a board working through the facility committee on what this is finding, what the recommendations would be, and ultimately would have a recommendation as it relates to 4 versus 3 sites. If it's 4 sites, hopefully that's highly informed by what we learned in the 3-site approach. If we're saying, gosh, there still is merit in thinking about 3 sites, we would bring that analysis to you. So let me stop and see, Rich, if you want to add anything to what I've said or clarify it. Others on the cabinet? Okay. I'll stay here because it's easy.
I wanted to be clear with the public because I don't think it's clear that part of the reason the reason that this came up was that we don't feel like we can make decisions without having more information, and that when we're talking about the idea of a 3-building configuration, we're not talking about the 3 buildings we have. It would be obvious that we would need to build and change, and that's why it would maybe not be feasible financially, that we're not talking about having the 3 buildings as they exist. We'd be talking about having to change them significantly. You couldn't cram the kids into the buildings as they are now. No one is talking about that. I don't want that to get out there. That's what it sounds like in the conversation, but that is not what we're talking about, and I want to be very clear about that nobody thinks we could do what we're doing in these 4 buildings in 3 of them. Just no one thinks that, and I don't want anyone to think that for 1 second. And I also want to say again that there's no point, in my opinion, in us doing this if it looks like we've already made up our minds. We are going out there really looking because we want information and we want to do what's best for the kids educationally and spending your tax dollars in the best way we can to get the best educational outcome. We're not trying to get a specific answer here. I mean, they have a guess of how it's going to be because they've all been down this road before, but we're not trying to drive this in any direction. And I want it to be really clear with everybody that that's why we're doing this, is that we want, so that when we come to a final decision, this is going to be a big, big expense this time when we start going through our facilities study to start fixing things. And when we start doing that, we want everyone to feel comfortable of why we've chosen to fix what we're fixing and how we're doing it. And I really just wanted to get that out there. So that was...
Yeah, no, I think...
I actually have a question, just a clarification, and I'm going to ask you, Dr. McCursey. I just want it cleared up because I don't get to use the excuse that I'm new anymore. But I'd just like you to explain just again, so I'm clear, how it's how we can bypass going out for other bids for this. I would understand that it would be very expensive because they've done the measurements and all these things, but this is, if I'm correct, a new piece of work that we're asking of them that is separate from the original.
That's a really good question, and I'm not sure I was clear enough on this, and so I'll answer, and then, Rich, you can answer. You can give the technicality of why we're allowed to do this. This is truly a phase 2 to build on and add to a major set of work. This is not doing a whole new study. That's why it's phase 2. It's highly dependent on working with a firm that already knows the district, knows the buildings, has scrutinized it, who we can really fine-tune. Can we fit into 3 buildings excellent high-quality programming? And if we can't, then the answer back is it will actually cost you far more than $80 million, and you will substantially put at great risk this wonderful district by trying to do that. Going out to a new firm, they would have to go do this first. They would have to do this first to answer that very focused question, because even the focused question is very big. But if we don't, well, then you'd be saying to a new group of people, spend your time studying this, analyzing it. They will not have the time working with all the principals as they have. They will not have the time working with the cabinet as they have. They'll not have had the time of working with the building committee at different points, even though the building committee is not involved. They know where we're headed in this process. They will not have worked with the Board of Finance in any way. So here you have a firm that already knows within the district, knows the buildings inside and out, knows the politics, frankly, and is also a very successful, highly regarded firm in Connecticut for this work. So I think we put ourselves at an extreme disadvantage to go rebid this because we'd basically be pushing back the clock. I would argue the amount of time it took to do this, we'd be pushing that clock back about that amount. Remember, you got this last November. So I don't know, Rich, if you want to add to that.
So a lot of the architectural firms have relationships with a lot of the demographers. So a lot of the work that would have to be redone if we rebid it was a lot of the enrollment work. So for those who were on the bid review committee to do that study, each architectural firm had kind of a pairing with an enrollment firm. So if we were to put it out to bid, they're going to want to have their own enrollment firm essentially redo that portion of the work. So not necessarily the complete facility look at, but really the demography work would have to be redone, and so you'd have to add that into the cost as well.
Now, also to be clear, at a later point in this process, so you as a board, if you get to the point of whatever is recommended and saying we're ready to move ahead, here's the plan, when it next goes to the next phase, for example, building committee, they will fully rebid. It will not be necessary, and this firm would then have to compete. So on other major building projects, so, I mean, our superintendent in Greenwich, when they were working on a $42 million art center, and now it's about a $30 million new Lebanon school coming online. And the new Lebanon school, where I was there soup to nuts to the point of a handoff, you had one firm at this point, that firm competed for that, the next phase did not get it, another firm did. So there are other times to bring the firms in, but go back. Feasibility phase, that same firm went through a couple phases at the feasibility point, because changing at that point became highly, highly inefficient. And you lose a lot of time, a lot of knowledge, and wherewithal. And legally and technically, we don't have to go out to bid on this. We can do a phase two.
Yep.
Just
So in terms of the building committee, they're really responsible for the design of the building. So one of the reasons you don't see in that large report are like images of what, let's say, a middle school would look like. Once it's handed off to the building committee is going to put out an RFP for an architect to actually design the look of the building. So that's at the point, as Bill mentioned, that where you're going to want to hand it off to the building committee. They're going to take those ed specs that are approved by this board and include those in their bid designs for architects to actually create the conceptual look and feel of the building.
And where are we with pricing on phase 2 of this?
So the quote was approximately $24,000.
I have a couple of questions. When I look at phase 2 and I look at the facilities planning committee, I think I would look at phase 2 almost in two parts. Like there's a phase 2A, which has to do with, coming up with, if you will, a list of needs, right? And that's more of the academic part of phase 2. And then you'll probably morph into a phase 2B, which is more about configuration, physical plant, and so forth. So I think there needs to be some fluidity in terms of the constituents in this planning committee. Probably in the first part of it will be heavy on administration. In the second part of this, as you get into the more physical plants, you probably want more representatives from the town in the committee. And so I think there needs to probably be a little bit of fluidity in terms of the constituents, but that also can go into the next phase, which is kind of probably a more detailed plan that has to develop around this. Because I think that the constituents here are probably not the right ones for every step in phase 2, but we could probably have a longer discussion about that. Any committee that I've been a part of that does the long-term plan usually has a chair of that committee. We haven't discussed that here. My recommendation is potentially having a member of the Board of Education as the chair of that committee, since it was commissioned by the board, but that's something that could be discussed. The third thing is that I think that while we might approve in this meeting going ahead, I think that at some point, once the committee is activated and does their work in terms of coming up with a detailed scope document, my view is that that probably should come back to the board for approval, because right now, these are all thoughts, right? These have to be put into a real detailed scope document, and before we actually go down the road too far, we should probably have an opportunity to review, discuss, and then approve it before we actually really, push the boat off the dock.
Yeah, and I think
Yeah.
the advantage of what's here on slide 7 and 8 is the natural time is that's .4.
Yeah.
So we're, there's something just before 1, which is, well, it's if you approve this,
Yeah.
then establish a committee. I think you do want to talk a bit about, because the plan is if you approve this, we got to get going.
Right.
And that means if you're thinking it should be chaired by a member of the board, that may be your facility committee rep, but you'll want to think about that.
Yeah.
Because this is a lot of work.
It is. Yeah.
And so then, but to also then keep it focused, and then it's quickly getting out to talk, it's items 2 and 3, and there to get, and number 4 is the work plan. If after 4 is drafted, that'd be the natural point to come back to the
Yeah.
board and say,
Yeah.
here's the work plan.
Right.
Because buried within 2 and 3, which I'm now unburying,
Mhm.
bringing to the surface,
Right.
is talking to the senior center, talking to the
Yep.
Parks and Rec, talking to anyone else has some, talking
Yeah.
more deeply to the PTO
Yep.
about this. What are the questions you'd want us to look at here?
Yep.
And while we don't want to go into biased, what is happening here, and I have lived this elsewhere, is we are simply for the community, for the amount of money that has to get spent, saying we owe it to you to look at all options. No school system that I know has ever said we will take all our buildings and change them.
Right.
That's what this will require.
Yeah.
I think in the phasing here, I think there's going to be a check-in point back with the board, and that's the advantage of using this firm, is that there may be some early feedback that says it's actually going to start to, we're estimating it's going to cost you well north of $80 million, and you truly will have to start a phased construction and renovation project in your entire district.
Yeah.
Most districts do not do that. They work on one building, not all of them at once, because if you go to the questions, just this issue there, 5 and 6, to fit what we do for at least the next 10 years in the 3 buildings, unless you want to have, and even if you want to have schools that large, which would dramatically change what Weston is as a school system, you then get into major grade reconfiguration, which gets into major fundamentals as to how we group students, how we organize curriculum, how we organize teachers. So you may find, as unbiased as you want to be, that if you get into this with the right leadership and right committee, we may be back fairly soon to say, if you are that open to that kind of big school and you're that open to that reconfiguration, continue. If you're not,
Mhm.
so
That-
those are,
Yeah, that's why I think it's very important to look at the four school option in the same lens as you're looking at the other alternatives, and not just relying on that study, which may be a little bit out of context when you look at it together with the other options. I think you have to cull out the 4 school option together with the 3 school options under the same lens.
Agreed.
In this. Yeah.
right. But this is worth talking a bit about,
Yeah.
because again, they did detailed foot-by-foot analysis of the
Yeah.
buildings. And to think about 3 schools wisely, you have to understand what's in the 4 schools that sort of foot-by-foot you want to either keep or get rid of and bring into 3 schools. So for
Yeah.
example, Project Lead the Way, those facilities, what we have here. How do you replicate this in the other buildings if you don't have it? Go to the preschool. How do you take those preschool classrooms, which they've analyzed foot by foot? I'm being that granular on purpose. And if you want to have a viable preschool program, you're going to put it in another building. So that's why I think that, why it's important to work with them and to build on that level of knowledge.
I think it's fair, though, to point out that the Silver Petrocelli study, while it's a footprint for improvement for our buildings, it's not necessarily an all or nothing. It could be a Chinese menu of what needs to be done most in this district to make it viable and to keep it good for our students.
Right.
And at that, we might defer or completely eliminate.
Right.
another project. So it's a very fluid thing, and
Right.
I think it's deserves to be said again that we're not looking to change the curricular or the co-curricular
No.
offerings that we have now. What we need to do is have the buildings and the envelopes and the floors and the ceilings to provide them, and there may be two ways to do that. And so I'm a little hesitant about, the $80 million figure, because
Right.
I think it's a pie in the sky.
We're not-
But it could be, a $20 million figure over 3 years, 5 years, 10 years.
Right.
It's still very much to be seen.
Dan?
So, Bill, this is going to be a little bit of an oversimplification, but when Silver Petruccelli first came and presented back last November to the Facilities Committee, I asked the question, do you think we could deliver the same educational program that we are now in 3 schools? And it was not a scientific answer, but the answer was leaning towards no. So my question is, if we enter into this phase 2 study, what's the possibility? Is there a non-zero chance that we're going to come out with a recommendation that it could happen, but we need to decide what the trade-offs are? Or, I mean, I don't want to just spend $24,000 on a study to prove something that we already know. Is this more than a due diligence exercise?
But Dan, we didn't offer to let them build at that time. We were asking to put them into the other 3 buildings. We didn't offer to say, can you build onto Hurlbut? Can you make Hurlbut a much bigger building and turn Wiss into a middle school? Could you? We didn't.
So that variable alone is enough to
Well, if
tip
you're
the
saying,
scales in
could
the
you
favor of.
take this amount of money and do, and I don't
Okay.
even think, and I suspect Bill's right. No, you probably can't, but we have to ask.
Okay.
We have to ask. You can't just willy-nilly say, oh, no, this is what we have to do. You have to look at other options when you're talking about prices that big.
And I would say, Dan, I view this exercise as a way to finally answer the question. There seems to be a public perception that we have tons of excess space
Right.
in our facilities. Even if going through this process, we're able to document that, no, we don't have space because of X, Y, and Z. This gives us a true hardcore plan about how our current curriculum is being delivered in what square footage, with a definitive explanation of what you would need to do to go to a 3-school building. So that part of this is it's building a case for the future of this
That's right.
district from a square
Or-
footage
Right.
Or
standpoint.
disproving it.
That's
Or
right.
And so,
disproving it,
but we
right.
have to, in my opinion, we have to get the answer to that question, because however many millions we go out there asking for to renovate whatever facility we renovate, we're going to have to answer that
That's
key
right.
question. It keeps coming up over and over again with people thinking that we have empty space just sitting around that's not being used. And so this is a different way of answering that question, but gaining some further insight about, is there a unique way or a different way to use what we have?
No, and that's fine, and I don't disagree. I just want to, I just want to make sure that there's going to be some value in that we're not just spending $24,000 on what could be a foregone conclusion. And what I'm hearing is that it's not. So if there's value to it, even if we don't get.
The process is worth every single minute and every
And that- I
single
think-
dollar to make sure that you
And I
get to
think
that,
that's
so
the
it's a
key thing,
town
the
buy-in.
process.
Actually,
I've been there, done that. You can't do it without it.
To that end,
can't.
to Dan's end, I'm going to say I don't agree that it is worth it unless we bring, and I know that you're not going to like when I'm saying this, so I apologize, but I think we have to bring in a building committee, and I think we can ask for somebody specifically different personality than whatever, if we want someone specific earlier in the process than later. I really do. I think it makes I'm just saying it, I'm not comfortable waiting. I think bring them in now, have them from the ground up, just have the voice of the town in there just from the beginning. I think that's good practice. I really do. I don't feel comfortable. This is too big of a thing. Just start it out that way. It's just one person's voice in there.
Well, isn't their input factored in
Yep.
to in the next steps?
Yep.
Number 2, solicit input from first selectman, who may then solicit feedback from his designees on what questions they would like to see addressed. I would assume the building committee.
They're supposed to be a part of building committees when we do things like this. I think that's part of the
They
charter.
are, but we don't have a building committee yet until we have the essence of what that program's going to be. You have to have a plan before you can have.
I think
I think the facilities planning committee is.
In the number one, the Strategic Facilities Planning Committee, I might be mishearing you, but I thought you were saying, recommending that this be sort of broken up a little bit.
Yeah,
That there
you know,
be, this phase.
My recommendation was take a look at what needs to be take a look at the timeline and what needs to be accomplished when, and make sure that the constituents are appropriate for the work that you need to accomplish. So maybe in the first phase, which is purely looking at more of the educational needs and academic needs, you may not need that. But as you move towards more of the implications for the physical plants and the buildings and configuration, then it might be a good idea to bring in other constituents from the town. That's what I was getting at in terms
I
of
would agree with that.
of having of
Okay.
potentially managing this
Yeah, I-
so that the constituents
mean,
are fit for purpose for what you need to accomplish.
I mean, I'm going to lean on experience. Rich can lean on experience. I think you want to get the input from the other bodies, but at the end of the day, you are the authority as charged by the state and the taxpayers for making sure this is a viable, efficiently run system for the purpose of education. So I think along the path, you get input broadly from constituencies. That building committee has a assigned by charter role, which comes later. You get input now, you get specifics now, and I think as much as you want to get that input now, you get that, but then you also, there's going to be a key point where you have handed this off to them. Other towns leave a role there, often on the building.
Right.
It's structured differently in Weston. In other towns, you don't have a permanent building committee, you have a by-project building committee that's formed and established. Once that handoff occurs, you keep a Board of Ed member on that building committee who's reporting back. But it's designed differently in Weston. But I think still you might get the input, but I would urge you against formally bringing the building committee on, but certainly going to them, getting input through the first selectman, and getting their point of view now as you would the Board of Finance. You're not going to necessarily bring the Board of Finance in to make those decisions early. So the question, why would you bring the building committee in? So I think you have to be consistent, that you go for input on questions, what you want figured out, so that they say they did think about those things, but then there's a formal handoff at a key point later. And I think that will come clear. I think the other thing is this, we want to, as early as we can, design this work to figure out pretty quickly at least estimates on cost to make it viable in 3 buildings. And that add-on, what's that going to cost? Because we have estimates here, what's that other estimate look like? And then I really think it's going to be that estimated cost to bring the same kind of program we have and more into those 3 sites. What's that going to cost us? And then second, if you still want to be in those 3 sites, what are you going to do with those students in those 3 sites? Are you willing to have facilities catering to that large number of group of students? Because that, I mean, right there may bring you as a board to the decision that we know it's going to cost X amount, and even if it's a fair number relative to what's in here, we're not willing to have schools that are that large with such dramatically different grade reconfiguration. You may get there. You may say you're willing to do that. But we know right now Wilton is the only district in the area with elementary schools that large. And my professional hunch and recommendation, though I believe in hunches and hypotheses, is there's a reason you have elementary schools the size we do, for the kind of quality of connections and understanding and teamwork, cohesion amongst teachers and all the rest that give us that strength. You go to a building of 900, it is very difficult to achieve that same sense of cohesion and all the rest. But that's to be, looked at.
We used to.
And you were going to look at for us the research on. We've been told that it's better not to have breaks. So the thinking is K-8 is better than breaking it up. So if we went to say K-5, with the trade-off in having, say, a building with 2 principals and 2 assistant principals and more students be you're saying the larger number, even though you had more administration, the larger number of kids is not as good. Is that, which is the trade-off? The break in building, so is that more of a ding to the kids, or is having them all in one plan?
I mean,
the more, I guess,
yeah,
is
I
there
mean-
research somewhere on that, I guess,
Oh,
that you could get for us?
Yeah,
Do
no,
you see what I'm asking?
but I think, Sarah, those would be things we'd look at.
Yeah,
Greenwich High School, 2,800 students. They work like crazy to break it into smaller schools.
right.
I worked for the Gates Foundation, funded on the whole small schools movement, was taking big high schools and trying to
Right.
break them into smaller high
I get all
schools.
that, people are
So-
going to ask us, so I'm
No,
asking you, so we can
so
give
what,
it to them when
yeah,
they
so
ask
Sarah, what I'm
us.
saying
That's
is, that would be part of the process. We would, there's a
Right.
lot of research on school size relative to, you know,
Right.
and the problem is it causal data or correlational data?
I know.
But there's a lot of research on smaller units put you to a better place for opportunity for outcome than large schools, which you're constantly trying to manage and create smaller units within. Now, so it maybe you say we can do 3 sites, but we'll do a lot of sub kind of uniting within those small sites. That may be where we end up, but we'll see. So
To that end, one of the major advantages that we have in this district that I haven't heard talked about yet is there's no merge, right? In every other district, you have 4, 5, 6 elementary schools that are feeding into a middle school, and then you have a completely different population and a completely different community. Here, we have one community that's moving up, and while they're changing buildings, the transition from 2nd to 3rd grade is not a shocking transition because it's all the same kids, just in a different place. And if we start
Thank you for
looking
choosing
at,
Weston.
you know,
It
at
is.
bifurcating the grades, and because I agree with Bill, I think, you know, I've been a proponent of the small school movement for forever. And it's just, you know, the advantages, whether tangible or intangible or theoretical or whatever the case may be, they exist. And so if we start to try and recapture those advantages by bifurcating the grades, then we lose that cohesiveness
Dan, I
that's
don't
going to move
disagree
up.
with you, but what I'm asking for is, can we have backup, so we can say, hey, look, when someone says to me, why did you, we can say, again, so why we're doing all of this is so we can, when we come out at the end, we can say, here's why, here's what we have, we have a great system. If we look to change anything, we don't change anything, we need to say to everyone in town, here's why, here's what we did,
Yeah.
here's why.
Well, I would,
you should
Sarah,
expect that.
yeah, that's what I was gonna say. I
Yeah.
think you should
Yeah.
expect that.
Yeah.
I mean, this administration is very
Right.
accustomed to us asking
Right.
for detailed backup to
Yeah.
support certain
And half of these
points.
questions I'm asking aren't really for Bill, they're for the
Right.
people listening, and he knows that.
And I would say this is, you know, to Tony's point, you know, what we have here is a very broad framework of how we move forward with
Right.
this, which we've kind of been struggling with for a while now.
Mhm.
And I think what this is going to have to be is, this is our step forward. And then there are going to be these checks where it's going to come back and we're going to revise and we're going to massage to where we keep moving forward, you know, removing certain things, gaining certain pieces of knowledge, till we're going to come out with a resolution that this board is very comfortable with going through the process to get approval for funding for whatever that resolution is.
I agree.
But I think that the key thing is the discussions we've had in September and the discussions we've had tonight, this is what I want us to have. It needs to be very open, very sharing, and very transparent. And Bill and his team, they will answer our questions. They always have, and they will have the detailed backup for, you know, why this versus that.
Yep.
We have that type of relationship with them, and I trust that that's going to continue. You know, the A through H members of the planning committee, that may be what's in place for the next 4 months. And then, you know, we're down to point 4 and we're ready to switch it up again and, you know, move on. That's okay. And I think that we're all going to have to be on board that this is going to be a project in steps and in pieces till we get to the final answer. Because I don't think we have a clear road path to get there yet.
The only thing I would add, I don't know, Ken, if you still want to add some, but listening to this conversation, looking at that page, this almost could feel like this is the ultimate planning committee for everything. I want to pull these expectations way back down to, this is a committee to figure out, can we fit into 3 sites? We may find out pretty fast that we can't unless you're willing to spend a whole lot of money or do this major change in building size and grade reconfiguration. And I think that's the advantage of working with them. They already have a lot of knowledge. And if we say, here are the items in this building we want to have in the other 3, and you have the room to expand, estimate what it's going to cost us. They can come back with that relatively quickly. Or if we say Hurlbut's offline, so now we're going to fold all that in, plus try and provide other opportunities, that's because then you have that in front of you, then say, here's really the next really in-depth phase. It helps you as a board get to, now we are moving on 3 versus 4, and that's where this really begins to get into all that detailed layering work. Because the root of this is we have people in town saying, you can fit into 3, you don't need 4, why spend X amount? And we're trying to say, all right, we'll take that as a legitimate question, let's analyze that.
So I want to add to this, and say a positive thing with this. I look at this also as an opportunity because we're leaders in our dirt. We're leaders in Connecticut. And I feel like if we start with the foundation of saying, what are the educational possibilities here?
Yeah.
That is where we begin, and we can really move forward, like what is expected of our town. And it is about getting buy-in, but it's also about taking a leadership role and saying, we have this opportunity, we're at this moment, and we need to move forward and look at what our educational and space needs are, and to be as innovative and as driven to support the families and children here as possible.
So we've had another round of robust discussion on this topic. Are we ready to actually proceed with the motion to approve moving forward with this plan?
A couple of things I guess we never answered. Would you consider having the BOE representative chairing the committee? I think it's important to have a chair.
I mean, this is our process, so it seems to make
Yeah.
sense.
Sure.
All right. And then we are going to come back, the planning committee, once they have the detailed scope
After point
document.
4 on that one
After
slide.
point 4, we'll come
Yeah.
back.
Yeah.
And Tony, I think that's really, really important
Yeah.
because, like it or not, I've been down this track.
Yeah.
This, sitting here tonight, stepping back, always try and step back. If I saw this, I'd say, oh, this is your entire effort to do the entire deal. I really think this is first, can we answer that question?
Yeah.
About 3 versus 4, I'm going to keep repeating it. What's that cost to expand, to have the same quality of programming? And if that means you got larger buildings, are you willing to do that? And once you get over that, you may say no, because then this work goes to busy on the 4. And to pick up your point, Sam, I mean, if you come back into the questions, this is going to force us to really dig into 7 and 8 here.
Of course.
What are our real needs? So we are the best.
Yeah.
And what more can we do under number 8?
Yeah.
So we're truly embracing all students, providing opportunities here within,
Yeah.
and this will help us fine-tune that out. So on the way to answer the 3 question, I think we may get that much sharper on the 4 question, if
I
I'm
think
being
you
clear.
have to. I think it's
Yep.
really important not
But-
to leave that behind as you're answering that, because you have to take that along with you,
Yeah.
because
But,
you have to put that side by
right,
side.
but again, having been down this track, unless we freeze some things and make some key decision points, so the sooner we can figure out that it's 3 versus 4, because then the real heavy-duty work starts, if I'm being clear.
Yeah.
I want to keep stressing that.
No, and I think that as we move forward and reporting out to the PTOs and with other parents, being very clear and very on point about this is going to be important. So,
The one thing that we're missing that I'd appreciate hearing is, prior to 2005, 2006, we were a 3-school district. So I'd be interested in hearing what the enrollment numbers were during that period of time, and then hearing about, well, obviously the educational program has changed significantly in 12 years, but just also, learning about what were the challenges that we faced even back then with the educational program as it was structured back then with the 3-school model, and how was that alleviated with the construction of the 4th school?
There's a whole report, which is what funded what the reconstruction was based on. So it's in central office. It's probably in my basement too.
I mean, I think at some point in time, there's
It's
something to be gleaned
interesting
from.
reading, including the consideration as to whether or not we would have 2 K through 5, 2 K through 6 schools, and the discussion that brought out.
It'd be a very
that was-
useful
Well, all right.
trip down memory lane.
Scavenger hunt time in the basement.
Let's try and find those.
Okay, so, with that, can I please have a motion?
I'm confused.
Sure. Move that the Board of Education approve to conduct the space utilization Phase 2 study.
May I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ellen. Any final questions, comments before we vote?
Should we put a dollar amount in the motion?
No, no,
We don't.
we
Not
don't
yet.
have one.
Okay.
Well,
Then no
it's 24,000,
comments.
but-
Do you have a firm
Yeah.
estimate?
And the minutes will reflect.
Yeah, I don't think we
I
can
think we
yet.
need to find that.
I don't think we can do that until we have a firm estimate. We have to do that next.
Approximate number is fine. Okay, so we're using an approximate number of 24,000, Rich, or should we use a different number?
Well, you could use up to 25,000
Up to.
if you wanted to be.
Can we read?
Okay, so I'd like to withdraw my motion.
Yes.
And I'd like to make a motion. Move that the Board of Education approve to conduct the space utilization Phase 2 study at a cost of up to $24,000.
Ellen, would you like to?
Second.
Thank you. Now, any more questions?
I'm assuming the minutes will reflect some of the tweaks we made to that?
Yes, and we
Okay.
will be able to comment on them if they do not.
Okay, great.
May I have all in favor? Thank you very much.
We should talk about it, yeah, we got
Next is discussion regarding the roofing. Yeah, who's going to run point on this?
Rich has got it.
Rich.
So at the previous Facilities and Finance Committee meetings, we had discussed the need for some additional roof repairs that needed to take place. The repairs were discovered by Silktown Roofing, who completed the knee wall at the WIS. They did address some roof repairs that were under warranty at both the WIS and the high school, but they did identify some areas that were not under warranty. So after discussions with the town administrator, there was a recommendation to request having the savings from the knee wall project, which were approximately $58,000, to be approved to fund these repairs as outlined by Silktown Roofing. So the first step was to go to the Board of Selectmen, which happened on Thursday the 18th, at which point to request reallocating the savings within the knee wall project to fund these repairs at the high school and the WIS. They did approve that that request, and then the next step was to go to the Board of Finance for approval for those for that same request. That meeting was also on Thursday the 18th. At that point, the Board of Finance did not approve the reallocation of funds. They felt that it should either be a part of the fiscal year 20 capital budget or ask for a special appropriation for those funds. We did go back to Silktown Roofing to get an idea of how long the work would take. They estimate, assuming good weather, 3 to 4 weeks. Obviously, as we get closer to the winter, that could delay items. The colder it gets or the worse the weather gets, that could delay the work. They did indicate that the project could potentially wait till the spring or the summer, but their labor costs would rise in the spring and the summer based on their contracts, so that would alter the price. And that's really where we stand at this point.
Do we have an idea of what their labor increase potentially would be?
They did not share that with us, but my guess is it would probably be, the 2 to 4% range.
Thank you.
Bring me up to speed. If this was refused by the Board of Finance. What is it exactly that we're talking about
Well,
tonight?
so it was voted down by the Board of Finance essentially because they disagreed with the concept of reallocating the savings from the knee wall project. The knee wall project came in at
Right.
approximately $50,000 under budget.
Right.
There was a suggestion to just request to transfer a portion of that savings to the additional roof work. The Board of Selectmen were in agreement on that. That was the hang-up with Board of Finance. They did not like that conceptual approach to the request. So we have some options. One, we can basically say we want this, since we're saying work could potentially wait, this money can go through our normal capital budgeting process that we're going to be going through with all of our other capital requests. Or we can go back with a special appropriation. If we do that, it has to meet their criteria of a need for special appropriation, meaning that we have absolutely no way of funding it ourselves. It has to be of an extreme need and a few other things. Hearing that the work could potentially wait, I don't know where that puts us. That would be, something to discuss. So part of this is we had a plan of going in to just get the savings transferred over to just get this work done before we got into the winter. But the Board of Finance was not happy with that plan.
Do we have precedent for that ever happening before, where you close out one capital project and transfer the money over
Yes.
to another?
Yes, every year. Every year when our capital budget has not gone, over, we have gone to them and said, we have this money to go back, and they've said, take it, use it on a capital item.
Okay.
It's happened over and over and over again.
With comparable dollar amounts?
I have no idea, I couldn't tell you. Probably, I don't know.
Okay.
So that's kind of where we are with this.
What was that?
Sorry, I missed the meeting.
Well, I mean, can we,
No, they left the door wide open.
armed with that information, could we go back to the Board of Finance and make another, the same request again and cite precedent?
My read on the tenor of the meeting and the strong feelings is that
No.
they would not proceed.
Right,
I
but
watched
if they're
it, no.
objecting to it conceptually because they disagree with the process, but the process has been pro forma for the past 10 years.
And the answer would be that was then, this is now. I watched
Yes.
the meeting, I wouldn't.
Yes.
not
It was, and then there were
Interesting.
there were members of the Board of Finance that were very supportive of this plan. And one particular member was just very adamant that he was opposed to this conceptual idea, and everybody said, okay, we will not dispute that. And so we either go back as a special appropriation to do it now, do the work now and find savings in our budget, or put this as a capital item that we're going to address in our upcoming budget cycle.
So are
That's
you
kind of-
polling us on those three
Well,
options? Or
I mean,
I know what you're going to say.
this was such an odd meeting on
I
Thursday
would-
night. I have no other way
I,
of
w-
saying it.
I wouldn't go. I wouldn't go back.
No,
I wouldn't go back
No.
as a special appropriation.
I would try, I think.
would not go back for a special.
At least
I would
not as a
right now.
standalone right now.
No, this does
Never.
not seem to rise to the level at the moment.
I think special appropriations are special,
Yeah.
and you
Urgent.
should not
Yeah. They're for
overuse the
urgent.
action.
Yeah.
But I do think that you could, do you think the door is open to talk to individual Board of Finance members in an effort to try and understand the process? I wasn't there, so I don't.
Well, I think, and let me just, if I might ask two questions. Rich, I mean, not to put you on the spot, but I'm putting you on the spot. Can we make it through?
I mean, the roofer was fairly confident we could, but if you have a really bad winter, I mean, leaks could get worse, and you're kind of like rolling the dice. But I mean, they were fairly confident you could make it.
Yeah, so fairly confident. I think, Alan, for whatever reason, that there was just very strong feelings, and from a longstanding member, and that member saying that that individual's always felt this way, always taken this stand, and maybe in the past others didn't join that person in the vote. But just in basic vote counting, at least two other people immediately swung with that person. Even said, I don't usually agree with this person, but I'm just speaking on what's in public record, saying, and then one member was very quick to want to applaud the board, and it's really the building committee for the efficiency here, and reward for that, so is willing to do that. So I think going back right now, and I, as superintendent, would not recommend going back for a special or supplemental for this. If indeed the good recommendation, and we won't hold it to you, we're not going to hold you to it, Rich, but if
The only risk is that if you have a very bad winter, the damage could get worse, and then the scope of the work could have to increase down the road.
Well, and that's the question. So not only the damage getting worse and the scope of this project becoming larger, but what are the cascading effects of that if you have moisture entering the school, right? So could this possibly lead to other projects?
Anything is possible.
Is it likely?
I mean, mold. I mean, if you're referring to mold doesn't grow overnight.
Yeah.
You know, and if there's a suspicion, we do test it, and you know, the facilities department is very quick to react if there is a leak or if we have heavy rainstorms. But anything is possible.
I feel that going back for a special appropriation right now would not be a very positive step. That being said, we did have a very positive discussion with them concerning some of the work, you know, that Mike has been doing in the district and moving forward on that front. They are very well aware we're still facing, you know, some challenges in that area. At a later date, if we have to go back with a comprehensive special appropriation like we did last year, where we keep them appraised of everything that's happening throughout the year, that may be a more prudent move.
Can I ask a follow-up question? So this all stems from information that was discovered as a part of the knee wall project, right? And the building committee was heavily involved with the knee wall project, as we know. What is the building committee's assessment of the recommendation to have these repairs done to those roofs?
This was their idea. The plan originated with them.
So just so I'm understanding things correctly, the building committee is in favor of this. We're in favor of this. The board of selectmen are in favor of this.
Yes.
Got it.
Okay, thank you. I just
We don't have the money, so.
Well,
want the record straight.
I guess the only, I mean, not to change direction, but I'm going to change direction as a possibility. We only learned Thursday night that this wasn't possible, so it's only Friday, Monday where we've got the roofers' feedback. I mean, it may be worth, and I don't know if you agree, Rich, going back to the roofer to say, can we really, we need really strong advice, because if they were to say you do have some amount of risk, given what 3 bodies have voted on versus 1, and if we then go back to the idea of some individual conversations to say, in this day and age, with the weather patterns we see, we had flooding in the Hurlbut Library. We haven't had that before. To say we need to revisit this because if we can get the work done. So it may, we'd have to think about a way to have a special quick meeting with the board. If they were to come back, Rich, and say, under more thought, you are at some significant risk, that would lead me to say, politics aside, we are heading off significant problems by saying, please agree to the $40,000 against which we've already saved, which was one of the Board of Finance's members' recommendations. Is that a?
I mean, we can ask them to come in again and take another look.
Well, do they need to come in again, or is it just giving us more definitive, oh yeah, you can wait till possibly next spring versus, no, your level of risk is here versus here, kind of?
Given that they looked at this, over the summer, it would probably be better if they came out again.
Yeah.
So the other question is, because this is going to be the narrative, we have a $50 million budget. We can't find $40,000 in the budget to address this?
Thank you, Dick.
So we do have a special ed deficit this year, and you did just approve a study that we do not have funding for. So at this point, no.
Thank you for adding that to the record.
I didn't see her. Well, I think I guess what I would recommend the board do is let's have them come back and look, and get up on the roof, look at these, and if indeed a trusted roofer is saying you are at some risk over the next several months, we would be very wise to then go back and say, we are trying to head off millions and millions worth of dollars of damage, shutting buildings, all the rest. Just look down the road to Westport, go over to Greenwich. They have school, happens in my daughter's school. They've relocated people for 3 months due to water damage. And you know what's happening in Westport. So we have right here, you know, so I think we just should get the roofer back if the board agrees, look at it fast, and if the roofer says you're fine, good bet, or we think you'd be foolish not to try and get this done, then I think we have the board meet quickly and revisit it.
Well, what do we do if he says, go either way?
Could I,
Well, then we make a decision,
Yeah,
but
we do.
I'm not being.
could I, no, could I,
we'll deal with it at that point, I think.
I think, actually, agreeing with Sarah on a point that she made a while ago, this is an example where the building committee member who is very involved in the project might be a good idea to be involved when the roofers go back up on the roof,
Or possibly involved in discussions with the Board of Finance
in this case.
to make the point with
I
them
mean-
about the structure.
Right. But I think to the point, this is the right time for the building committee to be involved. So this is-
That's exactly
Yes.
right.
Actually,
But I'm just saying, the building committee
Because-
having a conversation
yeah.
with the Board of Finance member who was
Yeah, so
wanting to move.
my recommendation to the board would be you allow us to have the roofer come back. We would reach back out to the building committee members to say, we're bringing them back on to look, could you join in that, see what they think, and there are a couple sets of minds on it.
Right.
Because I would hate to be sitting here in several months and we've had water damage
I agree.
and we did not do this due diligence and we just gave in, I'm being on a public meeting, I'm saying what I'm saying, gave in to the politics here as opposed to what is right for our buildings, right for our students.
Stop it.
Well,
No, but
no,
agree.
all you have to do is say Westport and Greenwich.
Yeah.
Hundreds of kids relocated because of water damage.
I think
So
that's a
I-
good plan.
Add to the fact that we have already established we have no place to relocate them to. Yeah.
Yes, yes.
So, this is a related question to how the, oh, sorry. This is a, green light. This is a question related to sort of the warranty thing. It was really exciting that they found this work and they did it under warranty, the part that we're not asking for. Do we have, a schedule somewhere for the facilities committee that we can see the things that are sort of warranted? And do we have the people who hold the warranties coming in periodically to check on things like roofs and whatnots that listen to me, whatnots, I'm sorry, but you know what I mean. If we, systems, thank you, that have
Mechanics.
that are under warranty are we taking advantage thereof, I guess is what I'm asking.
We
Yes.
are working with the town administrator to try to collect that. But a lot of these files are stored away in basements. They're Jarvis House, not
Okay.
readily accessible.
Gotcha.
That was one of the reasons we had proposed a while back, looking at document archiving.
Okay.
But that was always a budget issue.
Too expensive, I
Right.
remember. All right, gotcha.
Okay, so I think we have a good path forward on this one. Have the roofer come back, get some more, hopefully, clear, definitive information. And I do think possibly having the building committee involved with some discussions with Board of Finance could be a positive step. Yeah. So I don't think we need to vote on anything at this point, Bill. Would that be?
No.
Okay.
Just direction.
Okay, perfect. All right, so if everybody's okay, I'm going to jump back up the way it appears in CABE to the bylaws and policies. Mr. Bray, fundraising?
So this policy, when you're looking at it, you'll see there's blue and there's red. The red is your existing policy, which is quite brief. The committee made some changes to that and then incorporated into a larger policy, which is mostly recommended language from Shipman and Goodwin. And we combined it into one. We have a lot of policies like this where it goes over 2 areas. So it'll be policy 1324, policy 5147, and then the associated regulations. So basically what this seeks to do is to govern the process for when students are doing fundraising and fundraising is occurring out of the schools, how is that going to happen? Currently, we don't have any specific rules for it. It's handled mostly at the building level. However, because of the interest of kids in wanting to fundraise, we have a lot of different fundraisers going on at any given time sometimes, and we need to put some parameters around how those happen. So really where the governing comes in is in the regulation, and in that case, basically, it sets some rules for what fundraising needs to do. It has to be consistent with the mission of the schools, obviously. It has to be appropriate for the age of the students. We can't compel kids to participate, things like that. And we're not going to be officially endorsing any of the particular fundraising that's done. We don't allow door-to-door fundraising for kids. That's for safety reasons, obviously. And those are some of the big parameters. Where the real issue came in was, well, who approves the fundraising? Well, if it's below $5,000, the fundraising can be approved by the principal of the school. And normally there would be 2 weeks advance notice to the principal for the fundraiser, and she or he would approve it. In a case where there might be a more urgent need for fundraising, like a hurricane relief or something that those kids really want to participate in, the principal can waive that. And so if we expect that it's going to raise less than $5,000, we're talking about a bake sale, not that we do that anymore, I guess, but that kind of low funding activity, then that's the kind of thing that would be approved by the principal, or things that we're not looking to raise $5,000. If it's $5,000 or more, it has to be approved by the superintendent. It would be a 4-week advance notice. However, same thing with the urgency issue. The superintendent could waive the time requirement if there's an urgent need for the fundraising in his or her judgment. We do allow, we have the choice, and Shipman and Goodwin give us alternate language, but whether or not we would allow for crowdfunding, obviously that is a very popular tool now, so we do permit, this policy would permit it. It would obviously have to be approved and monitored. There'd have to be an adult associated with it, assuming this money is going through a school club or something like that. The money also from all of this, from school fundraising, would have to be deposited through the school activities fund and monitored that way. So basically it just creates some parameters around fundraising, and in order to protect the school and to protect the kids as well, but also to encourage it. So that's really the bulk of the language. And the committee obviously reviewed this a couple different times in different formats, but this is our final product.
So this is the first read, I'm sorry.
This is first read.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you don't have to vote on anything. It's on for first reading.
This is action request.
Any questions regarding? Thank you, Louis.
Thank you.
Bill?
It always, the superintendent's report comes at the perfect time, because I can call it late and not say much. So it is late, and I will not say much. What I will emphasize is that we'll be sending out by the end of the week the district goals interactive website. It's been updated, fine-tuned. You as a board saw that. I think it's a good, solid statement. And Tony, in a sense, it's the answer to that question you asked Ken a little while ago. So in each of the areas, I think it really presents good clarity on what we've set out to do this coming year, and it builds nicely on last year. So that'll be out in an interactive way for staff, then for the entire community. And that's really my update now.
Okay, thank you. Now we're going to move into some committee reports. First up is our communications committee. And at this time, I'd actually like to announce we're doing a minor little reorganization of that committee. Sarah Spalding has served us very well and admirably as chairman for the past period of time, but Samantha Nestor is the new chairman of our communications committee. And at this point, Sam, if you could please give us a quick update on where we're moving with this.
Yeah, the communications chair forgot to turn the mic on. As many of you know, the Communications Committee used to be an ad hoc committee. Now we are going to be meeting regularly. We have dates in the calendar. We have monthly meetings. And so that's the first one. The first thing is that we will be meeting more regularly. Together, there's an action plan that we've put together for the 2018-2019 year. It's in your CABE notes. The first item is a social media pilot. The second item is going to be more communication analytics, utilizing the information that we have for both email correspondence and social media. And also the third item would be coming up with communication initiatives for key events or programs that we do. For example, messaging around the fiscal 20 budget, space utilization study that we were talking about tonight. We have on the books workshops for school start and end times, and then other things as they come up that we may not be thinking about right now. And as part of all of this is a communication survey to conduct a survey during the second half of the year, not just to see how people are thinking or how we're doing, but also to be able to look at some of the programs that we've been doing and how they're working. And that's what we're hoping to do.
Sam, can I ask you a question? How are we differentiating between communication from the board and communication from the district, and how are we handling that?
Well, sorry. This Communications Action Committee plan, this is around the district.
Okay.
This is not a board social media pilot. This is a program through the district. The communications analytics and email correspondence, that's, for example, Craig can talk about this more, but seeing when those SWIFT communications go out, who opens their email, how many people are opening it, how are they reading it. And the communications through key events, it's really about how we as sort of oversight are going to look at what different programs the school is going to be doing.
I mean, and it would be used, Dan, just as a simple thing of, when we have upcoming meetings, what agenda items. I mean, like simple things like that. It's just another avenue to get information out to our families by the district. It's not going to be manned by any of us doing posts. Any further questions? Curriculum? Facilities, I think we know what facilities
I
is.
think we killed that one. It would be important, I think, to mention the one thing that we haven't talked about, and that was a food rescue program that Andre brought to us, so that our extra food can be brought from all of our schools to one pickup place for the food rescue people to pick up. And we have to provide the containers, that's it. So we really kind of embraced that and asked Andre to go forward and try and make that work. And our next meeting is November 1st at 9:15 in the morning at Central Office.
Great, thank you. Finance, Jacqueline? Awesome. Okay. Dan, policy? We're meeting, okay. CES, CABE. Oh, we have our CABE convention coming up in November. Jacqueline, I know you are not available that day, but everybody else is going to be attending. Is that correct? Yes. All right, excellent. Yes. WEF? DBT moving.
If I may, should underscore for the board, we've been in good conversations with them at a brainstorming level regarding two proposals, and that is proceeding. We've not submitted yet, But I don't know if you want to just remind the board quickly, Mike, of what the two are.
Sure. In the area of emotional intelligence surrounding the district's goal of a healthy learning environment, there's two key proposals that we've been working closely with WEF on drafting. It's been very productive brainstorming. The first is around a wellness program based on the principles of dialectical behavior therapy. The second is a district collaborative, multi-district collaborative, working with surrounding towns in the growing our capacity within the district around emotional intelligence and the programs we can offer children. So they've been very good conversations so far, and
the October principals reports. And are we going to continue emailing those to families as well, or
Oh,
just
yeah.
posting? Okay.
Yeah, it goes to all staff and all families.
Perfect.
June sends those out.
Okay.
Yep.
Awesome. Thank you. Next scheduled meetings, we have regular session on the 19th, but I'm assuming based on our executive session earlier, we're going to have a few items, so should plan on an executive session for that evening as well.
Yep.
We'll confirm shortly whether it'll be a 6 p.m. or a 6:30 start. I think we just need to gauge a little bit of time about exactly how much time we need for those items, so just be on the lookout.
And then what I typically do now, I don't think you have a hard copy in front of you. I don't know if you have it digitally, but we just quickly look at next month's agenda. I won't read the whole thing to you, but just to highlight is when we do the Chiefs of the Year recognition. That's a formality. So Penny will be here to be recognized in this forum. Then we do have another big report analysis for you. It's the Class of 2018 Statistical Report and Analysis. That'll be before you, so more numbers and all the rest. That'll really come from, yes, Ken, but also Lisa and Meredith Starzik will be very active on that with you. There'll be some more policies coming forward. You will, I think, vote on the hand-in-hand tuition. Is that correct? And then, very importantly, you'll have the enrollment report from Mike Zubin, Malone, and McBroom. While Lewis is listed there, he's not the actual one doing that report, but it's coordinating that with Mike Zuba. And so those are the major reports that will be before you next month.
Great. Thank you. Any final comments, questions before I get a motion to adjourn? I would like to thank all of you for your work this evening. I know it was a long meeting starting at 6 o'clock, but I felt we had a very productive evening, and I truly thank all of you for your efforts tonight. So with that, could I have a motion to adjourn, please?
So moved.
Thank you. Have a great night, everyone.
You have to let that motion happen before